Decision 92, Super Tuesday. Here from New York is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Voters on this Super Tuesday put Bill Clinton and President Bush solidly in the winner's circle tonight, but with reservations. At a time of great anxiety in this country about the present and the future, the only real enthusiasm about these candidates seems to be in their own families and among their hardcore supporters. This day was the toughest test yet in the primary season. 11 states for the Democrats, 8 for the Republicans. About a third of the delegates needed for the nomination. Primaries in Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Democratic caucuses in Delaware, Missouri, and Hawaii. And as I say, a clean sweep for the president tonight, a very impressive win for Bill Clinton, especially in the big pivotal states of Texas and in Florida. We want to show you the winners now, beginning on the Democratic side. As you can see, Bill Clinton, a native of the South, did extremely well in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Mississippi. His now principal Democratic challenger, Paul Tsongas, a native son of Massachusetts, won that state, also next door in Rhode Island. And now we can project Paul Tsongas the winner in the Delaware caucuses tonight as well. What does that mean in terms of delegates? Remember, a lot of delegates were at stake today, about a third of those needed for nomination. It's worth remembering that on this Super Tuesday, 783 delegates were at stake. You need, on the Democratic side, 2145 for the nomination. Bill Clinton picked up 429 today, Paul Tsongas 201, and Jerry Brown just 23, but Brown will stay in the hunt. So we want to show you now President Bush and how impressively he won tonight as well. But as I say, with that continuing protest vote, that is more than a nuisance for this sitting Republican president. He's the winner in Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Rhode Island. Pat Buchanan, or a combination of Pat Buchanan and David Duke, getting about 30% of the protest vote in a number of those states. What does that mean in terms of delegates for the president? Well, he won very impressively tonight. 421 were at stake. The president gets more than 360. He needs 1,205 for the nomination. No one expects that he'll be knocked off by Pat Buchanan between now and then. The question is, how much will the president be softened up by this continuing challenge, by this very resourceful and pugnacious Republican right-wing challenger to the president? So that's where we stand at this point. Now we want to show you the raw vote on the Democratic side. How many votes these candidates have been getting. In Texas, 17% of the vote in so far. Bill Clinton, 2/3 of that. Texas has been pivotal for presidential elections since 1845 when it became a member of this union. That's the raw vote in Texas. In Florida, this was supposed to be a battleground for Tsongas and Clinton. It's a runaway for Bill Clinton, 70% of the vote. That's one of the fastest growing states in the country with a lot of electoral votes, and Bill Clinton runs up an impressive victory down there. In Tennessee, 3/4 of the votes counted so far. Bill Clinton, as you can see, with a very substantial margin over Paul Tsongas and especially Jerry Brown. In Louisiana, next door to Arkansas, again in Bill Clinton's backyard. We'll be hearing a lot about that tonight from Paul Tsongas. About a quarter of the vote in, and Clinton impressively out in front in the vote counted so far. Oklahoma, about 3/4 of the vote counted there so far. Clinton with more than 70% of that, a real blowout. Jerry Brown running second. Paul Tsongas was not on the ballot in Oklahoma. His campaign failed to get organized in time to get him on that ballot. Mississippi, Deep South, 68% of the vote. Bill Clinton, again, he is a runaway winner in the state of Mississippi. So Bill Clinton tonight, who was early perceived as the front runner and then ran into a patch of personal difficulties, now makes a real claim tonight on the idea that he is the front runner for the Democrats as they head for Michigan and Illinois a week from tonight. We'll be back with continuing coverage of this Super Tuesday right after this.
Decision 92, sponsored in part by Ford and your Ford dealer, Ford Cars and Trucks. Have you seen what's new for 92? Have you driven a Ford lately?
For the Fergusons, just going to the store can be quite an adventure. The incredibly civilized Ford Explorer. The overwhelming choice of explorers everywhere.
Evidently, some people have money to burn. Why else would they pay an outrageous fee to carry a simple credit card when they could carry the Discover card, the card that charges no annual fee, yet pays cash back on every charge, which means it puts money into your pocket. Instead of burning a hole in it, it pays to Discover.
Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat brand tastes like little oatmeal cookies, which means grandmas are spending a lot less time in the kitchen.
Hit this little accelerator right here, and boom, you're gone, okay?
Cracklin' Oat brand's great oatmeal cookie taste comes from crunchy whole grain oats, which are baked with a touch of brown sugar. So now you can have that delicious cookie taste whenever, which is why grandmas are spending less time making cookies.
Ooh, what's that?
And more time sowing oats. Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat brand oatmeal cookie taste like grandma used to make.
Back now with our continuing coverage of this Super Tuesday. Bill Clinton, the big winner down south, but as I say, with reservations, he has now moved out of the South and into the industrial heartland of Illinois and Michigan. Tonight, Bill Clinton is in Chicago. These are live pictures of the governor of Arkansas, who now can rightfully claim his place as the front runner based on the delegates and this impressive roundup of victories today. But again, this will be a crucial battleground. Illinois a week from tonight, and Michigan as well.
Good evening, everybody.
Clinton is close to Richie Daley and his brother Billy Daley, who are the two most powerful members of the Chicago Democratic machine. And that's Hillary Clinton, the governor's wife, who will be introducing him.
I guess because this is the city I was born in, I get to be first. This is a great and historic day. No one, I was just told, has ever gotten more delegates on a single day to win the Democratic nomination. And what I would like to do in introducing someone is to just say one serious note, and that is this. We come here to Illinois and also this week to Michigan after having campaigned from Miami to El Paso and all the way up and through all of the southern states. And we do not find anything so different here as we found there. We find people who want the same kind of changes for themselves and their families that Bill and I want for each other and our daughter. And occasionally I will be asked by a press person, why are you doing this? Why would you and your husband go through this campaign? And I have a very simple answer. And that answer is because for as long as I can remember, growing up here in this area, going to the schools that educated me, meeting my husband and talking long into the night with him, we believe passionately in this country, and we cannot stand by for one more year and watch what is happening to it.
Not just an introduction, this is a speech by Mrs. Clinton, who has been an active campaigner.
So as we spend the next week here in my home territory, I hope that all of you will help us reach out to every single voter in Illinois and Michigan to bring to them the message of this campaign, which is bigger than Bill Clinton, bigger than his candidacy, but for which he is the messenger for the kind of changes we need. The next President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
you. Thank you very much. I must say, it is only tonight that I fully understand why they call this Super Tuesday. From Florida to Texas and all states in between, people opened their hearts to Hillary and to me, but for something much bigger than just another campaign. Tonight, the people are calling for genuine change because they are hurting. Everywhere in America, people know, even if they themselves are all right, they know that most people aren't, that the future is insecure, that we have lost our economic leadership, that we are coming apart when we ought to be coming together. The message of the voters tonight is that we got to go beyond the plain old politics of the 80s, the politics of division and denial and destruction. The people in the South heard the worst about me, but they saw the best. They know that the true measure of character in politics can never be perfection, because if it were, no one could pass. The true measure is genuine commitment that lasts day in and day out through failures and disappointment and defeat and setback. The true measure is rooted in a desire to do better and a belief that it is always possible to do better and that we are morally bound to do better. That has been the driving force of my life in and out of politics.
Bill Clinton tonight in Chicago with his formidable partner at his side, Hillary Clinton, who was born and raised there, and from the time of adolescence on, these two have been preparing for this moment. They met at the Yale Law School, and they've been actively involved in Democratic Party politics ever since then. John Chancellor's with me now, and he's been looking tonight at why Democrats voted the way they did. What did we find out, John?
Well, I've been looking at that great piece of political theater, which we just saw with Hillary Clinton. It fits into his campaign, Governor Clinton. The money is there, the organization is there, the message is coming across very, very well, and we saw that in the polling data today. The voters understood the messages from the Democrats today. They understood Clinton's populist message and Tsongas's message, which was much more pro-business. And so here's how they voted. And when you look at their incomes, under $30,000, Clinton did very well. 55% of the Democratic voters with annual incomes of under $30,000. Tsongas got 23% of that. But now we look at a higher income, over $30,000 a year, and they split. Clinton got 43%, Tsongas got 40%. But when you go on, Tom, up into the upper reaches of income of over $75,000 a year, that is Tsongas's country. And it seems to me this is proof of the fact that the voters are smarter than they sometimes look. These are complicated messages they both put out. The voters understood them, rich and poor, young and old, and educated and not old. The Jerry Brown is another thing that turned up in the polls today, a phenomenon. His voters are liberals, 45%, protesters, 20%, 40%, and they would vote for somebody else, 53%. Yet, while that seems like soft support, Brown, as you know, will go on at a $100 contribution level and is likely to hurt, in my view, Tsongas more than Clinton.
John, what about the people who said among the Democratic voters that they would like someone else? That figure was what, about 40%?
40% said that they were not happy with the way they cast their vote today. So it's a very soft electorate in many ways.
All right, thank you, John Chancellor. In fact, Claiborne Darden, who is a colorful poll taker down south, has said that Bill Clinton looks as tall as a pine tree because he's a pine tree in a desert. We'll be back with more after this.
About to see how Goodyear is changing all-season driving right before your eyes. Introducing AquaTread, only from Goodyear. AquaTread's advanced design channels water out of your way for dependable all-season traction. especially in the rain when you may need it most. Aquatread, the newest reason why we say the best tires in the world have Goodyear written all over them.
You know, I grew up thinking that nothing had more iron than spinach. But ounce for ounce, prunes have the same amount, and they're a much better snack.
Sweet, delicious California prunes. Find out how good they really are.
Like to try Total?
Officially, I'm a Nutri-Grain man.
Hope you're hungry.
I could eat my whistle.
Good. You'll have to eat 4 bowls of Nutri-Grain to get all the vitamins and minerals in 1 bowl of Total.
4 bowls?
Yes. Whole Grain Total has 100% of a day's supply of 12 vitamins and minerals.
4 bowls?
Takes 4 bowls of Nutri-Grain for that.
The call goes to Total.
Is that official?
Yes.
Total. 1 bowl, 100%.
For painful gas, which would you choose? Your antacid or Gas-X, the tablet made for gas? It's extra strength, 100% simethicone to fight gas faster. Faster than your antacid. Fight gas right with Gas-X.
They're fighting against all odds.
There's no cure, there's no treatment, there's no research.
But there is hope for kids with rare diseases on the next A Closer Look.
He was the Russian James Bond and risked his life to turn traitor. An inside look at the KGB as a real-life double agent tells all. Tomorrow on NBC Nightly News.
Try as he might, President Bush cannot shake about 30% of the protest vote within the Republican right wing of this country. But he is winning impressively tonight. We want to show you the kinds of vote totals that he is stacking up across the country. In Texas, which the president calls his home state, less than 20% of the vote in so far. As you can see, the president has a very impressive margin over Pat Buchanan in Texas. Florida, pretty much the same thing. Almost 80% of the vote has been counted there so far, but Buchanan gets more than 30% of the vote in Florida. That'll be a real battleground come the fall. Massachusetts, in the heart of New England, the president with a margin of more than 2-1 over Pat Buchanan at this point, about 40% of the vote counted. Down south in Tennessee, a middle southern state, about 90% of the vote counted, and George Bush gets 72% of that. Buchanan way back. In Louisiana, the president's 60% of the vote. You can count David Duke out of this in his home state of Louisiana. He gets less than 10% of the vote. Pat Buchanan gets 28%. But as I say, between the two of them, they get a protest vote of more than 30%. Oklahoma, almost 80% of the vote counted so far. George Bush is getting 70% of that. Pat Buchanan, less than 30%, but with David Duke, it again adds up to about a 30% protest vote at this time. And among Mississippi Republicans, well, George Bush, the big winner in Mississippi, there, the Buchanan-Duke combination, less than 30%. Rhode Island, this is getting back closer to the president's native ground of Connecticut. And as you can see, 3/4 of the vote have been counted. And Pat Buchanan slides over the 30% mark in Rhode Island. George Bush getting 62% of the vote there. Pat Buchanan has moved his guerrilla warfare tonight to the industrial heartland, to the state of Michigan. And this is what he had to say to his supporters about this Super Tuesday and his showing.
Last week, my friends, after our great victory in Georgia, I said it was time that Mr. Bush got out of the race. And tonight, I'm going to give him one more chance. My friends, I know what the returns are saying tonight, my friends, but consider what we have accomplished in just 13 weeks. We have torn away 1/3 of the Republican Party from the national establishment for good. I look out here, we have fielded a national army of recruits and volunteers, Democrat, Independent, Republican, that hadn't been seen since the days of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan.
And watching all of that right now from his offices in the old Executive Office building next to the White House is Vice President Dan Quayle. Mr. Vice President, welcome, first of all.
Good evening.
Pat Buchanan's not going to go away, and when he says he's taken away 1/3 of the Republican vote in this country, he's obviously preparing for 1996. How can you argue with his claim?
Well, I don't know what his plans are, Tom, but I will concede that there is a protest vote out there. We identify with the protest vote because they're saying they're fed up with Washington, they're fed up with high taxes, fed up with big government, fed up with too much regulation. And President Bush is doing something about it. He's got a reform agenda pending on Capitol Hill, and I wish the Democratic Congress would pass it.
But the fact of the matter is, not even the Republicans on Capitol Hill are very enthusiastic about the program that he put up there, and you put forward some areas like the $500 deduction per child, and then you pulled that back.
Well, we will be glad to sign the bill if the Democratic Congress wants to have the additional $500 deduction for every child. We have a jobs package pending on Capitol Hill. The Democratic Congress refuses to pass it. They're going to pass a tax increase bill. The president will veto it. I don't know what the Democrats in Congress fear by passing the president's jobs package. Are they afraid that it's going to work? Are they afraid that it's going to help George Bush? Are they afraid it's going to help Republicans? It's going to help America, and I wish they'd put partisan politics aside and pass the president's jobs package and pass it now.
I know you're blaming all of this on what you call the liberal Congress, but the fact of the matter is today, former President Richard Nixon is on the front page of the New York Times and on network newscasts complaining that you're not doing enough for the Russians. When you went to California, or when the president did, another former Republican president, Ronald Reagan, would not appear in public with this president. You've got real troubles within your own party at the highest levels, don't you?
Well, Tom, I'm glad you brought those incidents up so I can set the record straight. First of all, this nonsense that Ronald Reagan doesn't support George Bush is just nonsense. Of course he does. He's behind him completely. And this idea that former President Richard Nixon is complaining about George Bush in the area of foreign policy is simply not true. Former President Richard Nixon supports what the president has done in winning the Cold War, defeating communism, expelling Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Sure, we'd like to do a little bit more in the area of foreign policy, but we have limited resources, and former President Nixon knows that full well. He strongly supports George Bush in the area of foreign policy, and I'd say domestic policy as well.
Mr. Vice President, based on the interviews that we had with Republican voters today, they praised Pat Buchanan for his ideas. Now, the president has always dismissed the idea of the vision thing, as he calls it. Was that a mistake on his part?
I don't know what ideas that they're supporting of Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan is a symbolic candidate. He is a protest candidate. People are fed up with a bad economy, and they're voting for him in protest, not because of his ideas.
And what did you think, as a representative of the conservative wing of the Republican Party, when Pat Buchanan said he didn't want to engage in a debate with you because that would be child abuse?
Oh, I thought that was a little silly, but we're in the silly season. I noticed that Pat Buchanan invoked the names of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan. Well, Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan support President George Bush. And in due time, I hope that Pat Buchanan comes aboard.
Mr. Vice President, thanks very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll have continuing coverage on this Super Tuesday right after this.
An all-new I'll Fly Away, NBC Friday.
City of Angels, the case of the Broadway musical comedy smash. The dames are all suspects.
Surprised?
And the private dick's been duped.
You look like the kind of man who can get the job done.
Newsweek calls us a miracle. Smart, swingy, sexy, and funny.
Like is for fishers. This is to love. In the City of Angels.
City of Angels, a Johnny Walker Black Label presentation.
Starring Barry Williams. Tickets are on sale now. Welcome by WTVJ Channel 4.
Working hard every day, taking pride in what we do.
You know, you can get a can of beans anywhere, but when you come in my store, I'm going to bag them better than anybody else. It's not a boring job.
Low prices, that's our promise, that's our way. America's supermarket.
Everyday low price. For everyday life.
Channel 4, your official station for the 1992 Summer Olympic Games. From your 24-hour news source, this is a Decision 92 update.
Good evening, I'm Kelly Craig.
And I'm Tom Michaels. Thanks for joining us. This is a 4 News election update. Let's take a look at the latest numbers in the Republican race for president statewide. 60% of the precincts have reported. President Bush is leading the pack with 68% of the vote. Pat Buchanan has 32%. On the Democratic side, 59% of the precincts have reported Bill Clinton is leading the pack with 52% of the vote, followed by Paul Tsongas with 32%, and Jerry Brown rounds out the pack with 13% of the votes.
At Bush headquarters in Miami, a celebration got a little nasty. Bush supporters clashed with ACT UP, which is an AIDS activist group. Take a look. Well, no one was injured and no arrests were made. The members of ACT UP were escorted out. Tom?
Kelly, at Clinton headquarters in Miami, some early celebrations. Channel 4's David Bloom is standing by live with that story. David?
Well, Tom, it's incredible. The celebration here at Clinton headquarters is actually winding down. You would not have thought that earlier. This was supposed to be a race that was so tight, but as we just saw, Clinton winning by better than a 50% margin statewide and in South Florida as well. Doing well among elderly voters, among blue-collar voters, among less educated voters, and particularly among black voters. Now, Bill Mock chairs this campaign locally. Are you concerned that you didn't do better amongst well-educated voters? Tsongas seemed to score with them.
Well, I think the point it really is that the well-educated voter was the one who has done well under Reagan, Bush, and Quayle. I mean, we were going for the people who've been disadvantaged because we've had this administration in office. And so we want to go for the people who are going to be taking advantage of the fact that we have a new president next year.
Do these numbers bode well for Illinois and Michigan? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Bill Clinton still being a regional candidate.
Well, Bill Clinton won the presidency of the United States tonight. He did so well in Florida, they're beyond any expectations that people are going to really look for him to be our next president.
Okay, Bill Mock of the Clinton campaign. We'll have more at 11 o'clock. Back to you.
David, did most analysts feel that Bill Clinton would do as well as he actually did tonight?
Well, certainly not. And this was supposed to be a tight race, at least in Florida, where you have so many northern transplants. It was thought that they might vote for Tsongas as they did for Dukakis in 1988. That did not happen, at least not to an extent that you would see Tsongas come even close to Bill Clinton.
All right, Dave, thanks for that live report. Kelly.
Well, a tight race in the Hollywood mayoral race. Take a look at these numbers. Incumbent Sal Oliveri is leading with, we understand, updated numbers now, 46% of the votes. Challenger Maura Gugliante is close behind with 44%. Channel 4's Carrie Sanders is standing by live in Hollywood with the very latest. Carrie?
Well, Kelly, this race has been back and forth all night. At one point, the race was only split by 45 votes. As you can expect, in both camps, there's been a very upbeat mood. This was incumbent Sal Oliveri arriving a little bit earlier tonight. He says that he's done well in the city, surviving 2 years of recession. He says he doesn't want City Hall to become a power base. Here you see challenger Maura Gugliante arriving. She was the mayor in the city from 1986 to 1990. She received lots of endorsements from both the police and the firefighters union. As you can well expect, at this point, there have been no concessions.
And to me, there's more to this election than just a mayor winning a race. If I come through in this race, and I'm confident I will, this is going to be the rid of once and for all machine politics and special interests.
Never had a race that I was even ahead all the time or behind all the time. Not the last time, not the first or second time. So I just don't know. But it's looking pretty good. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. She says the folks here are waiting for the final numbers to come in. It could go for some time here until those final numbers come in and anybody knows who the winner is. And it looks like the spoiler in all this may be Jared Anton. We didn't mention him, but he's the candidate who seems to have stolen some votes, perhaps from Sal Oliveri, which has made this such a close race. Kelly?
All right, so far, Carrie, we'll want to reiterate that Maura now has 44% and Sal Oliveri 36%. So as you said, it's kind of close. Tom?
All right, and that is going to do it for us. We thank you so much for joining us. Again, at 11 o'clock on the Nightcast, a full recap of all of today's primary results.
We'll see you then.
Decision 92, Super Tuesday. Here is Tom Brokaw.
We continue now with this most important day of the primary season so far, and we want to bring you up to date now on the winners and the losers tonight. We'll begin with the Democrats, first of all, and show you how they're doing. Bill Clinton, the big winner on this Super Tuesday in his region. It's fair to point out he is a son of Arkansas, of course. He wins in Texas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, and Louisiana. You can pull out Florida and Texas and say they're not southern states. They're in a category all of their own, and they will be pivotal in the fall, of course. And Paul Tsongas, the winner in his home state of Massachusetts tonight, also in Rhode Island, and we can now project that Paul Tsongas is the winner in the Delaware caucuses. President Bush, a big winner tonight as well, but a continuing problem with the Republican protest vote running at about 30% in many of the states that you see that he has won: Texas, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Louisiana, and Rhode Island. So tonight we want to show you the battleground states, what was going on. And we're going to go to Illinois and Michigan next. This is the industrial heartland. The industrial heartland. Those are big and important working class states. They've been battered by the economy in the last 10 years or so. And a week from tonight, Paul Tsongas will make what appears to be a kind of a firebreak stand on his behalf. If he doesn't win in Illinois and Michigan, the way is clear for Bill Clinton all of the way. Tim Russert, who is our Washington bureau chief, moderator of Meet the Press and political analyst, is with us as well. Timothy, what does Bill Clinton take out there?
Enormous momentum and a lot of money, Tom, and a pretty good organization. It's make or break for Tsongas. He tries to go to Illinois. The closest state to it tonight was Florida. He didn't fare very well there. I'm afraid if Mr. Tsongas doesn't do any better in Illinois or Michigan, the vault is closed and it'll be locked on March 17th.
And what about the message that Bill Clinton takes to the Midwest?
Well, it's pretty interesting, the transformation he's undergone. As you know, he founded the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Conference. It was a moderate centrist party. Wing of the party. He's moved dramatically to the left, trying to reach out to blacks, to labor unions, sounding a lot like Tom Harkin the last few days, and trying to preempt Tsongas and appeal to that Democratic base.
And what does that mean for the fall for the Democrats, however, if they go back to the old base at a time when they were trying to win a new coalition?
Well, you'll see Mr. Clinton move dramatically back to the center once he gets this nomination in his pocket.
Is Jerry Brown going to be a nuisance?
Jerry Brown, I believe, will become Bill Clinton's Pat Buchanan. I think Jerry Brown's going to chase Clinton around this country and give him such a hard time, be a real thorn in his side. And look out for Brown on June 2nd out in California. Jerry Brown can appeal to the angry sentiment that's out there. And particularly if Clinton has the nomination locked up, it's an easy protest vote for the people of California.
And Pat Buchanan?
Pat Buchanan is in a situation, Tom, on to Michigan. Let me tell you why Michigan's so important to Buchanan and his plans. Highest unemployment rate in the country, 9%. An open primary, crossover Democrats, independents. Welfare and quota is a big issue, and Buchanan is in a situation to win it big.
Thank you very much, Tim Russert. Now let's take a look at what Paul Tsongas thinks about this Super Tuesday. He is standing by tonight. Mr. Tsongas, you did very well in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island and in Delaware, but in Florida and Texas. And those are going to be pivotal states come the fall. You ran well behind Bill Clinton. Doesn't he have a head of steam on you now?
Well, I mean, he won in his home turf, and I won in my home turf. And Delaware was the only neutral territory that we've had tonight, and I won that. In fact, if you look at the states where you do have neutral territory, I've won 6 of them, and Bill has won 1. You add that to the fact that on the national poll that came out yesterday, that I run the best against George Bush. I think the message is very clear, that my economic message is getting through, and with an appeal not only to Democrats, but to independents and Republicans alike.
We don't want to spend all of our time on the horse race here, but we can't resist that, obviously, because that's what politics is also all about. Are Michigan and Illinois must-win states for you?
Well, they're not must-wins. We have to stay alive. The fact is that the longer we can survive in this race, we're now finally getting the money. As you know, all of 1991 in January, we just didn't have any resources. That changed in February. We raised $1.4 million. We're raising more than that in March so far. So if we can simply stay alive, get our message out, then we think our strength will grow. We've been out-financed and out-endorsed, but the fact is, even in the South, where I lost, the fact is that most of the major newspapers, the Atlanta Constitution, the 7 major newspapers in Florida, the Tennessean, the Knoxville paper, San Antonio, Corpus Christi, Fort Worth, we've gotten those newspaper endorsements because the message is stronger. So if we can have the financial resources, I think we can do fine.
Senator Tsongas, so at last check at least, I don't think any of those newspapers had any votes on the floor of the Democratic Convention come the summer. Bill Clinton was able to beat you around the ears on your positions on Medicare, Social Security, and especially on the gas tax. Did you get behind the curve on those issues?
Well, the fact is that I have to tell the people that there are hard choices. Tom, I do not wish to be president if I have to pander to every interest group in the Democratic Party. I want to be president with a message that can grow the economy of this country. We don't have an energy policy, and I'm not going to send young men and women to the Persian Gulf to die because I was afraid to talk about a viable energy policy. You know, someone finally is going to have to be the hard choice candidate. I'm not going to be a panda bear. I'm not going to be Santa Claus. And I think the only reason my campaign is alive and doing well, the fact that I'm the strongest Democrat against George Bush, is because I give the American people that choice. And I think that people are a lot more adult and ready to make sacrifices and choices than the people in the Democratic Party believe. The middle-class tax cut is a classic example. There's no one who believes the middle-class tax cut is good economics, and yet that's what these people are standing for.
Senator Tsongas, thank you very much. We have a lot of ground to cover here tonight, and I know we'll be talking to you as the campaign moves along. We want to go now to Chicago and Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, who is the big winner tonight. You just heard Senator Tsongas. In fact, does he make it a fair point that this country is going to have to face some hard choices when it comes to energy policy and to Social Security and Medicare?
Absolutely, but look what the hard choices are. Senator Tsongas wants the hard choices to fall on the backs of middle-class working people who got the shaft in the 80s. The New York Times ran a report last week which said that the top 1% of our country got 60% of the growth of the 80s. Now, he hasn't asked the wealthy to make any hard choices. He says, I'm going to raise your income tax and lower your capital gains.
But, Governor,
Now, wait a minute. Let me answer that. He says the only way we can avoid a war in the Persian Gulf is to raise a gas tax $0.05 a year for a decade. I've offered a different energy policy than that. And, you know, in terms of pandering, look at what Senator Tsongas did in the last week of the campaign. He went to Texas 4 days before the election and offered the oil and gas industry 3 tax breaks, and they never crossed his mind before he tried to get votes in Texas. So I don't think all this name-calling is very productive.
But the fact of the matter is, when he talked about entitlements and means testing, he was really talking about $125,000 and above, and he said we may not have to get to that.
No, that is not what he said. Read his book. He's still sending out his book all across the country, which says it's just a small step, but you could start with lowering the cost of living adjustments for all people, including the low-income elderly. And now, look, I'm open to making the wealthy people pay more for their entitlements. That's not means testing. The difference between me and Senator Tsongas is I'm not going to do that before I ask the big health insurance companies, the healthcare bureaucracies, and the government waste in the healthcare system to get cleaned up. I also want to take on the drug companies in healthcare who are charging 3 times the rate of inflation. The difference between me and Senator Tsongas is I want to impose new responsibilities and new challenges on everybody, opportunity and responsibility. If you really read his program, instead of listening to the rhetoric, all the burden, all the pain falls on middle and lower middle class people, and they got the shaft in the 80s. I think it's time we shared it. Everybody should have the challenge to change. Everybody should have some new responsibilities.
Governor Clinton, about 40% of the Democratic voters again tonight said they wish that someone else were running, and about 20% of your most loyal voters tonight were saying they were still troubled by your draft status. Isn't that going to put you in the hole if you do win the Democratic nomination and go against George Bush?
Well, I don't think so. I think, first of all, you always get a case of buyer's remorse in these primaries because the candidates have to start differentiating themselves from one another. And the grass is always greener on the undriven street. And secondly, look at the vote we got among the veterans in the South. If they know the facts about the draft issue, that I put myself back into the draft, then the lottery came in and I got a high number, I think that is enough. And I think, you know, these character issues which have been raised, I've tried to be very candid about them. If the standard is perfection and no one can be elected president, what I've tried to do in my life is face my mistakes, apologize for them, recover from them, and go on. And I think that the real commitment issue is the character issue. George Bush has had this White House for 3 years and has not been committed to changing the lives of the American people. I worked for 11 years, committed to change. That is the issue. And I think the longer this campaign goes along, the more it'll become apparent.
Bill Clinton, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more on Super Tuesday right after this.
Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat brand tastes like little oatmeal cookies, which means grandmas are spending a lot less time in the kitchen.
Pull.
Cracklin' Oat brand's great oatmeal cookie taste comes from crunchy whole grain oats, which are baked with a touch of brown sugar. So now you can have that delicious cookie taste whenever.
Come on, Marie.
Which is why grandmas are spending less time making cookies and more time making hay.
Smile, smile.
Kellogg's Cracklin' Oat brand oatmeal cookie taste like grandma used to make. Ask anyone who's driven a Ford lately. Ask them about quality. One of the reasons 5 of the 10 best-selling cars and trucks in America are Fords. The F-Series pickup, Taurus, Explorer, Escort, and Ranger. 5 out of 10 of the country's best sellers. It's quality that breeds success. Have you driven a Ford lately? It's more than just a question. It's an answer.
I'm home. There you guys are. Hiya, honey. Well, what's wrong? This is usually your favorite part of the day. Oh, bad headache. Let me help. I'll take the kids. You take a Motrin IB. The doctor says it's the same medicine as in prescription Motrin, but in non-prescription strength. Really works on my headaches. So go relax. I'll take care of Mr. Duck.
Motrin IB, the relief of Motrin in non-prescription strength.
Her name is Sarah, and she's lucky, because today she'll encounter egrets doing dances and alligators in the wild. She'll see how other moms take care of their kids, and she'll be doing this, recycling, through a program of the National Park Service and its recycling partner, Dow.
We can make a difference in what tomorrow brings.
Together with the National Park Service and folks like Sarah.
Dow lets you do great things.
It's Super Tuesday on The Tonight Show, too. Guest host Jay Leno welcomes Oscar nominee and dad Warren Beatty, plus the hot new sounds of singer Sophie Hawkins tonight.
He's Primetime's funniest man.
Who?
Katie Couric goes behind the scenes with Seinfeld.
That's like going all the way.
Tomorrow on Today.
Votes are being counted on this Super Tuesday night, and we want to share them with you now, both on the Republican and Democratic side. As you can see, of all the votes that have been counted so far, George Bush is the overwhelming favorite, but Pat Buchanan and David Duke between them running at about 30% of the protest vote, and that has been fixed during this long campaign season. We still have a long way to go. Let's take a look now at the Democrats. The Democrats, a substantial number of the votes have been counted there as well. Bill Clinton piles up a very impressive raw number of votes tonight, about 2-1 over Paul Tsongas there. Jerry Brown running well back, but Jerry Brown will stay in the race. Harkin and Kerry, they've dropped out, but they'd be gratified to know that they did get some votes tonight, but given the status of their campaign finances, they'd probably just as soon have the cash in an envelope. Thank you very much. So that's where we stand now with the raw vote. John Chancellor has been taking a look at the mood of the country. I said at the beginning.
Why am I laughing? I've just looked at the mood of the country.
Right. I said at the beginning of this program that there's a lot of anxiety out there. At least I encounter that. Is that reflected in what we've been?
We certainly found it in our polls of voters in 8 states today, and we asked them two interesting questions, one to Republicans, one to Democrats. What were the issues that concerned you today, that made you vote for various candidates? And we've written some of them out. The Republican issues are economy and jobs, taxes, education, and competitiveness. Now let's quickly look at the Democratic issues because they are almost identical. The economy and jobs, health, education, and taxes. Now when I look at this, Tom, I get the feeling that this is a truly unusual election. There is nothing about foreign affairs in the minds of the American voter. There are no concerns about a new world order. And when you go over these figures, what you find is an electorate frightened by unemployment, frightened by medical bills that are hard to pay, frightened by bad schools. And I would infer from these figures that what Americans are really worried about are other countries taking the lead. That's the subtext, I think, of what we're learning this far this year.
So even if the American economy makes a statistical recovery of this summer, it goes well beyond that. It's a whole restructuring that they're worried about.
I think it is, and every time they see figures on kids doing poorly in schools or schools doing poorly with kids, and they see other countries, that's why we're likely to get some Japan bashing, other countries coming up. It's a dangerous mood in the electorate, and I think quite unusual in a presidential year.
Thank you very much, John Chancellor, for being with us tonight. We hope to have Jerry Brown for you when we continue. He says that he doesn't get enough attention from the national media, but first, we have to find him.
Sold.
Let's say you bought a painting. Let's say Van Gogh's sunflowers. Let's say you used the Discover card. You'd have a little money coming back. Because with the Discover card, every single charge earns an annual cashback bonus.
Nice.
It pays to Discover, the card that pays you back.
I hate the diet. So I don't. What I do is eat right in the first place. I start with grape nuts. You see, grape nuts is fat-free. It's a great natural energy source that helps keep me going all morning. It's naturally delicious. Really hearty. There's nothing quite like it. And when I eat grape nuts, when I eat right, I feel great. Try Post Grape Nuts. Eat right, and see how good you feel.
Breakfast with Grape Nut cereal helps keep you going strong all morning long.
You know, California prunes have a lot of vitamin A. And they say that vitamin A is good for your eyesight. Maybe you haven't had a prune lately.
Sweet, delicious California prunes. Find out how good they really are.
Doctors know there's a flaw in eggs. They're high in cholesterol, and diets high in cholesterol and fat can contribute to heart disease. Fleischmann's Egg Beaters are 99% real egg with 0 cholesterol and 0 fat. Egg Beaters, eggs without the flaw.
Call me a trendsetter, but I was eating wheat thins before people knew why they were baked and not fried. Now everybody knows who needs a greasy chip, right? Besides, wheat thins are delicious. Delicious is still in, isn't it?
There's constipation and there's constipation. Oh, yeah. When it's this bad, take it to the max. New Maximum Relief Formula X-Lax pills with 50% more X-Lax medicine for maximum relief. Oh, yeah. Take it to the max.
We're back on the Super Tuesday, and there continue to be whispers around the edges of the Republican and Democratic establishment, in political circles at least, that there may be other Democrats who will get into this race, but time is running short. NBC's Andrea Mitchell is in Washington tonight. Andrea, you're keeping your finger on the pulse of those people whose hearts do beat a little faster on Capitol Hill when you mention the White House. What are they saying tonight?
They're saying that they want to do something to stop Bill Clinton. Now, we know that Bill Clinton is now moving toward the nomination because of his big successes tonight. And if he wraps up Michigan and Illinois, I think he'll be very hard to stop. But the people who are running for Senate seats, for House seats, are really nervous about Bill Clinton. So they want to try to do something to have a deadlock convention. You've got people like John Dingell, the powerful Michigan Democrat, who is going to lead such a movement in Michigan for that primary, joined by the head of the AFL-CIO there in Michigan.
In fairness to Bill Clinton, this may be the best thing that's ever happened to him because, in fact, he has been out there winning this primary by primary, and he can then say, you see, the powerful established interests of Washington have turned against me. I'm on your side.
Exactly right. They think that the people on Capitol Hill think they have to be a little adept about this, more agile than they are in most cases. But what they would really like to see is Lloyd Bentsen, the senator from Texas. He's safe. He is too old to run again in 1996, so he would not be a threat to any of the other ambitious Democrats, such as Dick Gephardt, George Mitchell, who really didn't have the guts to run this time, but would want to run in '96.
All right, thank you very much, Andrea Mitchell. Now let's go to Michigan, and Jerry Brown is standing by there tonight as he prepares for that important Midwestern primary next week. Jerry, what have you got on? Is that a Union jacket?
That's a UAW jacket, Local 1776, gave it to me this morning as their leaders endorsed my candidacy. They went over from Tom Harkin to me, and it's pretty simple why. I am against the fast track. I'm fighting the trade agreement as Bush is negotiating it, and people in Michigan are mad as hell. They've lost jobs, plants are closing down, and they're ready to fight, and I'm ready to fight with them.
Mr. Brown, in fact, no one would take anything away from the individual auto worker in this country, but a lot of people believe that the unions are not part of the answer. They're a part of the problem about why we got in this fix in the first place.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a minute. The bosses who are making 150 times more than the guys on the line, they're the people who are ripping us off. And we can make great cars, and we can make them with Americans. They're German workers that are getting paid $22 an hour. They've got more unions and more rules, and they're still selling more cars in Japan. It's not a question of the working people. It's a question of the management and the political leadership. We need the laws, we need the rules, and we need the unity to make things here. Otherwise, we're not going to have a middle class. You're going to have a growing impoverishment, and that's crime, and it's family breakdown, and it's destruction of everything we believe in as Americans.
And you would take, then, the Democratic Party back to its old coalition?
I'd take it forward. This is a coalition of students, working people, environmentalists, and most interestingly, people who want a flat tax. And they're sick and tired of the politicians selling loopholes for campaign donations. They want to be able to understand their tax code. So this is a coalition of the future. It's a coalition that I think can win, and it's the only one that's bringing new people in. It brought new people in Maine and Colorado and Nevada, and I know the experts and the pundits, they've been writing me off, but every week we've been getting stronger and stronger. We're still here. 3 of the other people that started out, they've gone.
You're quite correct in saying that most of the national pundits said that you didn't have a chance when you began this campaign. But the fact of the matter is you're still alive on Super Tuesday night going into Illinois and Michigan. But it's very hard to see where you go from there because you continue to run third in the national field.
Wait a minute, I'm running third in the field. That's better than 5th or 6th. We're moving up. This is like the tortoise and the hare. We're moving slowly, but inexorably. Our famous 800 number, which started out slow, has now reached the 2 million mark in pledges. And I know we had a little altercation there originally, Tom, but the thing is keeping this campaign alive. And if you don't mind, 800-426-1112. 426-1112. We can go all the way to the convention if people in America who want to join a campaign fighting a corrupt establishment will call in and join with us. I think we can take it back. And it's not easy, it's not going to happen overnight, but watch Michigan. This is a state where people care, they've been hurt, and I believe it's tailor-made to start the revolt.
All right, but if you lose in Michigan and you lose in Illinois, then it goes the other way, right?
Then I think it's going to be more difficult, but look, I'm here because I saw how politics worked. I've been around it all my life, you know that. It's gotten much worse. We have what I say, and I'm just telling you the truth, it's a governing elite. It's spending millions of dollars to prop up Bill Clinton, a guy who's out of touch, I believe, with the best spirit and tradition of our party. He's from a right-to-work state. He's the only state other than Alabama that doesn't have a Civil Rights Act. He is not committed to fight a free trade agreement that is really killing blue-collar jobs, and he is not joining together in the kind of insurgency that can really throw over the decrepit, complacent, arrogant power group that I believe is ripping us off. And I know those are strong words, but that's what I'm feeling here in Michigan, and I'm going to give voice to it as best I can because I think people have a right to a choice, to an alternative, not a kind of an almost Bush, but a real Democrat in the spirit of Thomas Jefferson, who said, stop the power of the few from rioting on the labors of the many. And that's the goal of this campaign. It's been the goal of our party since 1791.
Thanks very much, Jerry Brown. I think it's worth noting, however, that Thomas Jefferson did not have an 800 number. Thanks very much for being with us tonight.
He didn't, but he would have if he could have. Because this is the yeoman.
We have to go on. Former Governor Jerry Brown of California, now 2 sitting governors are joining us tonight from Massachusetts, William Weld, a Republican, and Ann Richards, who is the sitting Democratic governor in the state of Texas. Governor Richards, does Jerry Brown have a point when he says the country is fed up with what's going on in Washington?
I think that Jerry Brown is really touching into something that is a current in the country. People are afraid. It's what you said, Tom, when you were here in Austin. There's sort of a recession of the spirit. People are not just worried about the economy. People are worried about their children, whether their children are going to have jobs, whether they're going to have jobs. I think that there is such a groundswell moving for change, and dramatic change in this country. You're going to see a very lively race come fall between the Republicans and the Democrats.
And Governor Weld of Massachusetts, is that the message that those protest Republicans are sending to George Bush as well?
Well, I think the protesters are somewhat frustrated about the economy, the recession hanging on 6 months, 9 months longer than anybody thought. But I think you all are dead wrong there when you say that nobody cares about the Gulf War, the Cold War, the New World Order. All they're focusing on is domestic concerns. I think all those successes of George Bush on the foreign policy, the worldwide front, have entered into people's assessment, not only of his personality, but of his character, of his leadership ability, and they become part of the backdrop, the bedrock even, against which people are going to judge the candidates in November. You may see a lively campaign, but I think it's going to be a campaign the Republicans are going to win again, because they should, because there's nobody in either party who's on a par with George Bush in those factors.
But even among Republican voters, they're saying that Pat Buchanan's got better ideas than George Bush does, Mr. Governor.
Well, but they're not voting for Pat Buchanan. They're voting because they're sore that the unemployment rate is lagging higher longer than they thought it was going to. Even Buchanan's own voters, a lot of them say that they don't think he's timber.
Well, Tom, it was interesting what happened in Texas today. So far, Bill Clinton is outpolling George Bush in Texas. I think the thing that people are concerned about is not that the recession has held on longer, as my friend Bill Weld points out, but the fact that they can't see any hope for its ending. We're telling American business that they have to play on a different playing field than foreign business that comes here. We invoke antitrust laws against American business people, but we allow foreign business interests to indulge in any sort of combination that they want to. We tell American business that we are going to make them play by specific tax rules that are not applied, of course, to foreign business. And as a consequence of that, people are not worried about this immediate recession as much as they're worried about no hope for the future. They can't figure out what's going to sustain this nation. We have lost our principal interests. We've lost oil and gas. We've lost steel, automobiles,
Governor Richards,
electronics, you name it.
Let's let Governor Weld weigh in with a final word here.
Well, if I may, I don't think the election results support that. If you want to talk about voting returns in South Carolina, we had more Republicans vote than Democrats last week for the first time in history. In Georgia, we were within 5,000 of the Democratic vote. That's a massive change. In my state, we have more than a couple 100,000 jobs directly tied to international trade. If we heed the siren song of protectionism and isolationism, we're going to cost hundreds of thousands of jobs, at least in my state, and it's just a very, very short-sighted policy to pursue. I think the president's deep background in the international arena is a major asset for the United States of America at this point in time.
Governor Weld, Governor Richards, thanks very much for being with us tonight. I know we'll be checking back with you as we go through this long campaign trail of 1992. On Super Tuesday night, then, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, the big winner down south, and Paul Tsongas, the winner in his own region of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Delaware. A clean sweep for the president tonight, but a continuing 30% protest vote. We move now to the industrial heartland, to Illinois and Michigan. NBC News will have continuing coverage beginning tomorrow morning on NBC News at sunrise, followed by Today. I'm Tom Brokaw in New York.
Horses are dying in South Miami. Channel 4 has exclusive details on the reason why. That reason, no bigger than your fingernail. We'll tell you about that and many more stories, and of course all the Super Tuesday election results coming up on the Nightcast at 11.